right, so you guys have brought to I didn't even hear. I have no idea about this MMO.
Nobody heard about this.
I'm actually, don't say you guys. Let's give proper credit to Callie. This was a good find.
Good job.
Until this morning, I'd never heard of it either.
Good,
Yeah, right.
Good job, Chris. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Appreciate the contribution.
Can we at least give it to Kooky?
All right.
All right.
I'm
Thanks,
sure
Kooky.
Kooky would have found it.
Anyway,
Kooky.
so all right, Callie, tell us about.
Kooky, go find an MMO that we're excited about. Good job, Kooky.
We need to start.
Tell us about this MMO, because I mean, there's definitely some really interesting concepts at work here.
Yeah, so
And please spare no expense about telling us about the game.
no expense.
Yeah, I mean, I want to hear all about it.
All right, Hammond. All right, so it's been created by Intrepid Studios. They're a team made up partially of newcomers, partially of people who did EverQuest, and partially of people who did XCOM Enemy Within.
I was going to say, they have a lot of games underneath their belt.
They do. And basically, it's a high fantasy setting, no faction system, and the theme of the game is kind of built around their node system. Each server is built on a series of nodes, which are represent different areas of the game. And those, when a server launches, there will be no civilization in the game. There are no cities. There is nothing is built or ready to go. But as you go around to these nodes and do things like gather or craft or fight or anything that gets you XP, those nodes will begin to become more civilized. So if you're crafting in an area, maybe a blacksmith pops up at some point, and as more and more people are attracted to the area, the city will grow.
The civilization is tailored based on what is being done, the majority of in that node.
What is being done and what natural resources there also will play a part in it, because what natural resources are there will influence what people are doing in that node. And cities can both come and go in this game. Things can happen that can destroy a city. If they give an example in the video where they're talking about maybe a city that's near a mountain digs too deep and unleashes a dragon that just lays waste to the node, and players there are left with the decision: do I want to fight the dragon, or do I want to pick my stuff up and move?
Yeah, one of the cool things about this overall, we talk about a variety of things that we like in MMOs, but how one of the big key points, or one of the pillars of it, and they talk about this in their video, is the narrative aspect. They want the narrative aspect of this game to develop according to what players are doing, that the world reacts to players, what we're out doing, what we're accomplishing.
Right, and we've actually got their Kickstarter video on screen so that you can just get an idea of what type of product they're trying to achieve, just in terms of, I think setting is really important, especially when it comes to, choosing an MMO.
It looks gorgeous for a Kickstarter game.
It really does. The thing is that, when did the Kickstarter for this?
Like 20 days ago.
Yeah, not long.
So there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of development that's already been, been happening.
They have a lot of skin in the game. They spent a lot of money developing this game before even putting it to Kickstarter.
Okay, so what is it? What are some of the big things, like, as an MMO player, that have really interested you or captured your imagination?
So what really caught me at first was the creator of the game. The very first thing he talks about is that he's been an MMO player for a long time, and a lot of the things that he sees in the current MMO market just don't appeal to him anymore. There's a lack of risk and reward. There's very much a sense of everyone can do everything, and that's not intrinsic to what he views in an MMO. And that's the sort of kind of like attitude that he caught. He hates the pay-to-win system, and he hates the cash grabby nature of cash shops and things like that. Like, those are things that he doesn't feel should be in an MMO, and that's why he's developing this with a subscription model, although no box cost for the game.
Yeah, one of the things that really stood out to me, I was going through the Kickstarter and looking at the FAQ, and one of the questions was, how can you build an MMO for $750K? Because that was the Kickstarter cost. Now, as of this episode, they're up to $2,200,000 with 11 days to go. But they said in the FAQ that this project is primarily self-funded, and we're dedicated to staying true to our vision and not being compromised. The core product can be delivered with our current capital and the crowdfunding goal, and going forward, they're dedicated to keeping their vision consistent with their philosophies. And as a player, as someone who's gone from MMO to MMO and, paid the subscription willingly and gladly, because if I'm playing something, I'm willing to pay for it, and consistently seeing it fail to disappoint patch after patch after patch, the idea that these developers like Callie said, are putting their own skin in the game, that they've already contributed so much to this, and they're going at this with I think not just design philosophies, but also business principles that you don't really see in practice with other companies and other MMOs. Speak strongly to me, not only as a player but as a consumer as well.
Yeah, and there's definitely room for MMOs to grow. I think that, in a lot of ways, MMOs have been sort of worked into a rut and it kind of worked into, this very kind of entrenched thinking in terms of what, content rollout has to be, what, the MMO experience has to be, what players need to experience, what content. One of the things that really attracted me early was the concept of the node system,
right,
where they are really focusing on, and here we are, we're seeing it being described here on the screen right now, where they're very focused on developing regions as regions and having each region be unique, not just in terms of what type of monsters you're fighting or what types of resources are there, but in terms of, the more player actions that are being done, and you can see it right here being built on the screen, the more actions that are being done by the player community in one area, the more that node builds up. So you just saw right here in terms of the video, you saw the settlement very early on in the process where it had a single tent and a campfire. That's it. And the more that it grows, the more that you actually end up building a meaningful player city.
And the developers have said that each area will not be equal.
Right.
Not everyone has to see everything. Not everyone needs to have the same amount of influence or power. What you put into the game or into certain areas is what you're going to get out of it.
Well, right. And he also means that in terms of things like natural resources.
Right.
One area might have a mithril mine, and that could be something incredibly rare in the game.
Yeah, exactly. Now, another point that they made was, as you have these sort of like cause and effect with the different regions involved, that as a player city or as the player community starts to do more actions in one given area, that it sets off, as we're seeing here, maybe a gigantic dragon attacking from a volcano. Let's say you bury too deep within the volcano and it unlocks some big evil dragon that comes and attaches.
Like a one-time event type of.
It could be. Yeah.
I don't know that. I mean, yeah, it sounds like that's what they're committed to doing, to making an MMO that's much more of an experience as opposed to a kind of, cynical gear grind or, just
a singular experience that you just buy, and anyone who buys it can go through it. The
idea that everything has to be equitable and everything has to be the same among all levels of play, and that
everyone has to ride the same ride.
You should be able to get the same amount of enjoyment out of it whether you're playing for 50 hours or 5. You know what I mean? Like that whole idea, I think, runs counter to what an MMO is or what a player base wants out of an MMO. Now, at least I'm speaking from how I feel. You know what I mean? I feel like, the MMOs that I've been playing recently have not lived up to this idea of a world that I want to continue to inhabit every single day, or that changes with my input. I haven't felt that in a really, really long time.
But I also wonder, like, when I first heard about this, like, coming in, like, say you come in 2 years later down the road as a new player, is your experience going to be cheapened now because, like, the world
it'll be unique,
or it's going to be continuously
that's what is unique. See, I think that, and I see a lot of comments in the chat here, because I think the design concept behind a game like this is so different from what we're used to in video games, period, that it's clashing up with how we think about this type of stuff, right? Like, when you buy a game, you expect people to go in and do everything that everybody else has, but they're not designing a game world so much. They're trying to design a world in here where, if you come late, you don't necessarily have missed something.
You
history.
missed the battle of Tremas because Tremas is dead and defeated.
Yeah, part of history, but there's still more that's going to unfold. Think of it more like in real life. There's lots of stuff that you've missed or that you're never going to get to see,
Right.
but maybe you read about. But now as new events come out, you do have a chance to partake in those. They've mentioned that depending on how servers evolve, if there's more people who flock to the mountain cities on one server, then they might get different events or have a different history that unfolds to a server where the majority of the population is centered in the plains.
And it mentions that very specifically because these worlds are going to develop differently, different things will happen from server to server.
Right.
NPCs will go to different towns because they like certain things that maybe one server has that another one doesn't. Different people, the antagonists and protagonists will change from server to server
Right.
because of where they end up.
Interesting.
I think my concern is that I've heard a lot of these kind of high-minded ideas out of MMOs previously. I think the one that I hold up as my favorite example of one that really overpromised and underdelivered was the game Horizons, and that was an Atari-developed game. And when I was hearing about that in development, it was going to have the most amazing graphics. It was going to have a sort of Minecraft-ish like system where you could where if you chop down a tree and you made lumber out of it, that tree stayed chopped down until 5 in-game weeks passed or something, and something else would grow in its place. And so there were a lot of really fundamentally good ideas, and then when the product came out, none of that was there.
Horizons didn't live up to it at all.
Right. Yeah, I think the only thing that was there from the concept is, you can play as I'm a fucking dragon. Like, you could fucking play as a dragon. That's it.
But that's a fair concern literally for any game that comes out. Will it live up to what it's promised?
Absolutely. And I think, what they're already showing off is very impressive.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
It really does.
And again, that's one of the things that impresses me, not just from what you're seeing, but this isn't just someone who has a plan that's coming and saying, give us all your monies and let me do this thing. They already have some pretty substantial groundwork laid out already. And now they're asking people to buy into it.
To make it better.
Exactly. And as I was watching this video and I was talking with Chris earlier today, what it seemed like they're trying to do is take a lot of elements, not just, these theoretical elements or things like, this system from this game, and put it into one, but they're trying to take a lot of concepts that work very, very well in a specific game. Like one of the pillars of foundation that they talk about is this idea of economy. And it's when they first talked about it, Nate, you were, kind of a little cautious about it, but essentially it sounds like what something like Eve has done with their economy. Now, I don't know if that's something you can program into a game or if it has to happen naturally, but in a game like Eve, you have this player history, right? You have things that are essentially just being driven by this population within a game itself, and I think that that's something that this game is trying to push as well.
Yeah, and I like that they're not using any kind of global auction house. Everything is, by the region. If you want to move stuff and if you want to sell mithril, you got to go to where the mithril is, gather the stuff up, go somewhere else to sell it if you want to, or sell it there if you can, but you're not going to get as much right near the mithril mines.
Right.
I like these ideas, and that is very much something that you did see happen and evolve naturally in Eve. Huge wars were fought over resource-rich areas.
But see, that's the problem, is that it all depends on fast travel. Because if you can just fast travel to the mithril mine, buy low there, and then go halfway across the world in an instant,
nobody's going to buy that.
then that's going to collapse the economy.
And I don't
I don't think there will be a very much of a fast travel. Like the whole idea of the node system and the region system seems to lend itself more to putting down roots almost somewhere.
and building up and defending a certain region as opposed to going out and being a solo adventurer. Like, this does seem like the end game actually is like when you can buy a house. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be aspects of this game that are valued different from other MMOs.
Yep.
And I actually, going back to my days of Ultima Online,
Moonglow Defense Force.
I really do remember when in-game in-game
Historical
property
events?
meant something. Like
yeah.
it actually was something that was sort of critical to the game. And if you wanted a successful guild, like if you wanted to be in a successful player-run community, you needed to have those kinds of resources because there were all sorts of very valid reasons, but when it does seem like it's a more thorough thought through idea for an MMO. So the couple of things that I didn't see in here that that make me a little bit concerned. I didn't totally love the armor or character design. I thought it was a little bit generic. The world design is a little bit generic. It seems like a mishmash of...
You've seen it all before.
Generic fantasy junk.
Yeah,
it gives off an Elder Scrolls vibe to me.
It is definitely influenced by Elder Scrolls. I think a little bit influenced by like just kind of traditional, more straight ahead D&D style, like what's the game I'm trying to think of?
Pathfinder.
No, not Pathfinder, but that you might be
like Neverwinter Nights.
Thank you. That's what I was going for. Was Neverwinter.
Yeah.
I think I get a definite that definite generic fantasy vibe off of it. And there's nothing in there about the combat system or what the combat system will be like.
We don't know much about that.
Yeah, we saw them showing off the ability to like levitate.
Yep.
And the ability to break through layers of the world. I think that's really cool. That's something that they borrowed from EverQuest Next,
which is also there's a bunch of someone in chat said, "Oh, this looks like EverQuest Next," and I think a lot of the developers that worked on that are also involved on this project as well. But there was one part of the video too where we saw what looked like four like hotkeys down on the bottom.
Right. So, I think the other thing to kind of double back onto the node system and why I think that's so interesting is, it does. It does encourage you to put down roots, defend places, but I think along with that comes a less contrived version of PvP too. Because right now, what do you have? You have a whole bunch of different faction systems. Like World of Warcraft, you've got Horde and Alliance. Final Fantasy XIV, you've got the 3 different nations. There's some kind of pretext that gives you a reason why you're fighting each other, right? And I think the reason that you're battling is kind of intrinsic. Like you're defending your area because it's a resource-rich area.
You'll form your own faction.
Exactly. Something that we see happen quite organically with a game like Eve. And I think, Callie, when you drew the parallels to Eve, I think that's really what got me really interested.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that much of a context for Eve. Like, Eve was one of the MMOs, because it was set in space, I couldn't get into as an MMO.
Right.
And that's my own fault. Well, so I don't know what its virtues are. So
but I do remember people like Kyle talking about even how there was last year this big huge player run war that's going down in the Eve history books and nothing like this will ever happen again. And I was like, that's really kind of an interesting concept for a game.
And you hear stuff like that happen every few months with Eve. They usually make the headlines for some type of record that they've set or something like that.
Think about not even a game.
A group like Goon Swarm in Eve, they were super powerful not only because they had so many people, but because of the systems that they owned were really heavy in resources.
Yeah.
And that's what eventually sparked one of those wars, was a group trying to move in and take over those resources.
I think what it seems like is this game is very focused on a organic world design, and then they're doing things like setting up conflicts like you would see in either the real world or that have worked in other virtual environments, and they're just very purposely putting the dominoes in there, putting the hints of that in there to kind of guide their player community, but that in the end, this is all going to be contingent on the way that the players end up, relating to one another. And I don't think that it's a bad idea to have maybe one region in there that is so dominant that it just builds and builds and builds one node to this unbelievable status, and then you do have that ability to have, kind of subterfuge and subversion and coming in.
I can't take over them. They've got sweet resources. Maybe if I get this other group here, we can start a war.
Or even the idea that, like you said, if there's one particular node, let's use the example they use, where there's this city that's built into a mountainside, and they become this unstoppable force that dominates the server, and then one weekend you hear that entire city has been wiped out because they dug too deep, and a dragon came out and demolished everything. That node now has to rise back up from nothing, and it gives other places, other factions, or groups that have been formed a chance to take over. Like you're building into your game a way for the players themselves to craft their own experience.
I love this idea of having a big event that you can respond to, like a dragon attacking, right? Mm-hmm. You go, you respond to it, whatever, the big community of the big group of people end up taking down this dragon, and now you're looking at each other after that dragon is dead, going like, okay, who's going to stab me in the back and try to build this node up?
The new regime shall rise.
I fucking love this idea.
On top of that, though, because you talk about having this idea of like this event, right? And in modern day MMOs that we have now, that's a patch that would be announced, right? Next month, the dragon awakens. But what's even cooler is this idea that you wake up and you hear about this long battle that's been going on for the past couple hours because the dragon just randomly appeared.
Yeah.
And one of their lead developer talks about this because PvP is one of the 4 tenets of the game that they're working on. He specifically mentions PvP is designed to catalyze change in the environment. That's what it's there for.
Yes.
Their key design philosophy there is PvP is meant to facilitate the idea that players want different things from MMOs. And that's kind of how they're using PvP to
and that the struggle between those desires should be the thing that drives the PvP element instead of this,
arbitrary point system to get better gear.
Right. I think, and that was the thing that was so attractive about PvP in early MMOs, because you did have some of that, right? Like and early on, one of the red flags for me when talking about this game was I was really concerned about the economic aspect and the way that different regions would be separate from one another and
have their own auction houses.
How basically during the Kickstarter video they kind of poo-pooed the idea of having a global auction house, and I was like, I don't know if that's the best in terms of practical design for your player base, but the way that you lay it out, where there's a struggle for resources and things like that, I think that is intrinsically more interesting as a player, even though it is an inconvenience, and it kind of, hit me that we have been trading off convenience for immersion in MMOs for a long fucking time. And I think that it's nice to have someone finally coming in and going, no. We're gonna try something entirely different. Because when the entire industry is sort of doing the whole follow the leader routine, it does present an opportunity for you to, if everyone's going right, you go left. And I think that this team has some very good insights about what drives MMOs and MMO player bases, and I really, really hope that this is going to be good and that it's not going to be one of those another one of those Kickstarter disasters.
That is a great observation, Nate, about how this team seems to have taken a look at the industry, seen how everyone's been going in one direction, they want to go a different direction, and how they've also seemed in certain cases to sort of, because you're right, a lot of people have claimed to do this type of stuff before, but they seem to have plans or contingencies for certain pitfalls. A lot of the sentiments that are popping up in chat right now is, oh yeah, I love this idea of, hey, I'm new guys, what do I ganked, out killing some orcs, ganked, and
love
stuff
it.
like that.
Love it.
But other games have also done stuff like that before, and that type of thing can be a detriment to
suck a dick, dumb shit.
Certain players.
Go build up, some backup armor that you can rely on.
It's also easy enough to put in something like, if they're level 5 or below, you can't kill them.
No, not even that. You should be able to kill everyone. But again, if this is something that's player run, if there are people who are just mostly going around randomly killing people with, without gaining anything, like, I'm just going to kill people because I'm a dick, then there's probably, I could also see there being a system where you gain notoriety and maybe you have a bounty, and the more you do that, now suddenly, if you are that dick, you are actually worth more to other players to kill you.
Everyone forgets about the PK bounty system.
Yes, they could put in systems that make it so that either it looks unattractive to you as the person killing.
Yeah.
Or like you can build punishments in like that.
Well, and keep in
And
mind,
actually, that can create in-game, like, I almost want to say, like, white knights for new players, where
It
people
can.
create their own
Yes.
alliances of, like, hey, let's go protect newbies
But
and
also-
gain points for doing so.
also keep in
Yes.
mind that your node's development is contingent on earning XP, and killing lobies isn't getting you XP. You're actually harming your node.
Yeah, so
and-
there just needs to be proper incentive and consequences to every type of action, even if it's as simple as killing a newbie.
And who's going to be carrying better gear? Who's going to be carrying more money? Really? The newbies? Yeah, you can farm newbies like level 2 boar if you want to, but you're going to raise your notoriety. You're going to raise the bounty on your head. There's going to be more of an incentive for someone to kill you than you're able to make off of killing those fucking newbies.
And this provides an actual incentive for a higher level player like Nika to go to a low level zone and protect newbies, because you're probably getting stuff from killing all of these high level assholes who are harassing your noobs.
yeah, you know what? For
Noob farms.
For all of the criticism that FF11 gets, one of the things that was really fascinating was the way that people would help one another, because everything required somebody else to do it with you. There was so little ability to solo in that game that you saw people who would sit on their, level 75 white mages and heal a party in the dunes because they didn't have anything else to do, because they just felt like it. And I think that is a really interesting idea, and the node system is something that kind of lends itself to that idea. If you want to have a good lobby experience where you're not constantly being ganked, well, then I think you should probably choose a pretty well built up node, don't you?
Someone's saying, so going to other nodes and killing noobs will be detrimental to your enemy's nodes, so there's
Oh.
some incentive there too. You're
That's
right.
interesting.
There's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
They could also just, do something like Blizzard does, where you turn on a PvP flag.
What if you're so attached to a node that your actions, your moral actions in the game, flagged, with a binary good or bad, that your negative actions add to the notoriety of that entire node. So if you have a big collection of player killers and they want to develop their own city of
Turns into more of like a thieves
outlaw.
guild type
It's
place.
going to become like, if you want to
Fuck
kill
yes.
if you want to be the villains, you join this faction.
It's fucking Isengard.
I love, dude, come on. If this isn't the greatest, like, I want this now. Like, that, to me...
This is the line from the developer that actually sold me on the game.
All right.
Is in regards to PvP. If you own a home in a node and you don't want to see it destroyed, you better be ready to defend that
To defend
node.
it, yeah.
That's actual risk and reward. You can lose something you've put effort into. Thank you.
Now,
And again-
there's also a quote somewhere too that mentions like open range or something like that. Like if you have your house on like the open range. So I feel like they probably will have some type of smaller, limited player housing in a safe space. But if you want more, bigger, if you want to design it yourself and you get more out of it, then yeah, you have to actually risk it and put it out in the world.
Come on, you cannot honestly fucking tell me that you don't want this. And the thing is and to go back onto my point about narrative from earlier in the news segment, you have to, I think, let go of the idea of the concept of a very strict narrative that's being dictated by the game. And I think that this is where you have to go, yeah, your narrative is going to be dictated by your players and the player community and the history that the players weave inside the game itself. And I think that is a lot more interesting to me, at least, than I've finished the main storyline, wait for the next piece of content injection. In this way, content, and narrative is constantly being driven by the player community.
Not to mention, you always have a reason to log in. It's not like, all right, I have the best gear now, I'm going to log out and wait.
Yeah.
You need to constantly make sure that, you have enough gold, you have enough resources, because you never know when something might happen. The more you
And you
play...
can log out and your entire house will be destroyed when you log back in.
that could be possible. There could be some type of built-in... I don't know.
No. I think that should be possible.
Someone destroys it.
But the idea that the more you play, the more you accrue, the more prepared you are, there is no upper cap. You can always be accruing more strength, more wealth. Fine, yeah, you log on, your house has been destroyed. Well, it's a good thing that I have enough, wealth built up and saved up to re-erect it.
Yeah, what happened, Callie in Eve? What happens when someone's Star Destroyer that they've been building for 3 fucking years? What happens when it gets blown up?
Yeah, Callie. He's not in the room.
Oh.
No. But in Eve, we've actually mentioned this before, is that there are actual insurance agencies in Eve. So you can take out actual policies. So if you're...
What?
Yeah. Basically, there are
But
players,
it's a loss. Look, I mean, to answer the question that I posed to an empty chair, you take the loss. You take as the player, you take that fucking loss.
Yeah, so... After all this conversation, the biggest thing that I'm concerned about is the same reason that I don't want to get into Eve, and that's once it's been around for so long, then the difficulty curve or it's going to be really steep. Like, how do new players necessarily get into this if everybody in it is already like super mega progressed?
You got to rely on the veteran players. It's not actually that different from the way that MMOs operate now, because if you want resources in the early game, you do need to rely on other players to give you context or to give you resources or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bear's excited. Man, I can't wait to join the Homeowners Insurance Guild in this game. I'll sell Dragon and Griefer policies at a premium.
Dude, you laugh, but Eve has an insurance company in it. Player run.
We were actually just talking about that, and I'll pose it since you were out of the room again. What happens when someone who has been building a starship or a base in Eve for like the better part of 3 or 4 years and plugging tons of resources, like tons of players are plugging in tons of resources? What happens when there's a raid on that and it gets blown up?
It's gone.
It's gone. Why is that the worst thing in the world?
Yeah, no, people like have spent months working on like a Titan and losing one. Like, oh my God, yeah, there was a story of a whole group. They were trying to caravan out of a station.
Yes.
And one of their Titans got picked off on the way. And it was like something like $30,000 actual dollars worth of investment in it.
Yeah.
What?
And it was just gone.
Yeah.
It got blown up, and the guy, oh my God, the better part was the guy who was piloting it got potted, which means he lost all the implants and all the skills he'd learned to pilot it.
Carletta says, hey, bub, time to pay your insurance, or, something bad might happen to you. You know what? That's entirely possible. Like, going up to someone and be like, look, pay me, I'm going to destroy your house. And at that point, you know what's going to come into play? Stuff like the Moonglow Defense Force.
Look,
such a shame would be if something was to happen to your house.
The thing is I mean, you guys give me shit about that, but it was actually something that happened in game to, like there were hordes of undead that would occasionally rise, and Moonglow, for some reason, for I think it was a period of a couple of months, was seeing that disproportionately, and so it was a bunch of different guilds and factions that kind of banded together to make it. Yeah. And to end up making a console.
That's history right there. The formation of the Moonglow Defense Force.
But I mean, it is something that I still remember to this day clearly.
Yeah.
And something that most modern MMOs don't have. Like most guilds now, like the Moonglow Defense Force was started as like a response to a threat, right? Mm-hmm. Like there was a
just
direct
like it
threat.
would be in an actual real fantasy life type deal.
Exactly, and it was less of it was like a story driven, like a story necessitated
someone
guild.
Didn't just log on and be like, "Oh, I want to make a guild today. Let's make a defense force."
Right.
It was necessary,
right.
As a response to stuff that was happening in the game,
and that never happens anymore in MMOs. Your guild is your collection of friends, and that's it.
For me,
and it's just another chat channel.
For me, this will be my first Kickstarter that I ever contribute to, and I will play this game at launch when it comes out. And here's the thing: even if they can't live up to their promises and can't live up to what they're trying to make here, at least it's an MMO that is operating on design philosophies that I agree with for an MMO. They're trying to do the things that I want to see in an MMO.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about how, or at least I've mentioned how I think the next big thing is going to be when someone can properly take the whole Minecraft, Ark Survival Evolved, Conan Exiles, type design and put some type of narrative in it and put it on an MMO scale, you're right. Even if this does fail, people are now trying to do that. They're starting to do that, and they're not going to be the first.
Yeah.
Or they're not going to be the last. Sorry.
I also have to wonder if at least one of the cities, like just one of the cities, is a server.
Newbie-town?
Yeah, because that's the thing is that I do remember Newbie Town being a thing, and it wasn't, at least early on in stuff like Ultima Online, but then they ended up creating an entirely separate island that introduced you to the first, a little bit of content. So I think that there is ways to do that to make it friendly to a new player or incoming player, or allow them to learn or gather some resources
themselves before going out and joining the greater. And that's the thing too.
Most games do have a noob area.
Yeah, and that that's a good thing to point out too, especially because these people seem so willing to adapt and innovate, that as they go through this process, if there are some things that don't work or that the community seems particularly resistant against, they can rework them. They can find new ways to go about it, or new systems to implement to help facilitate this grand design that they have.
I also like the idea that this sort of lends itself to the idea of slow drip content feeding, where instead of getting a 3-month downtime in between content patches, that they can, in very direct and dynamic ways, end up adjusting the cause and effect that ends up, necessitating one of these big events.
How much ore has the dwarf town dug up? Oh, they're at 49 million. We'll get that dragon event ready.
Right.
And your patch notes could literally have nothing about content in them if you want. It could just be changes.
No, or like with what Elite Dangerously is doing, where you have things that happen and you have no idea when it was added to the game. You have no idea what triggered that.
Yep.
And that's the thing, is that when we have all of these different gauges and values and on-screen things that we're trying to control and have an impact in, it loses, what we're doing loses some of the mystery. Like I like that about video games, that I don't need to know all of the integers and values that are needed to be able to make this game work on a mathematical level. Like, there are some people who,
jerk off to that.
Yeah, that's their shit. But that's not me. I like, that sort of mystical aspect of like, oh, this sword works better than this sword. And then you talk to someone who's like, well, it's because it has 6 more value points in it. And you're like, shut the fuck up. I don't really care.
Forget patch notes.
And that's the thing, is that if you, I'm sure that there are going to be people who end up breaking this down and doing dat digs and, coming up with this very analytical way of playing the game, and you can figure out what causes what, but you know what? That mystery has got to be there for at least a little bit. I mean, in FF11, there definitely were people who were dedicated to finding out those secrets, but how long did Absolute Virtue stonewall?
I was going to say, it's one thing to find a character model. Like, okay, we know a dragon exists in the game. You don't necessarily know how to get to it, because imagine how long it took people to map something like Salvage out.
Right.
We knew what the bosses were. We knew what the armor looked like, but that didn't mean that we could figure out how to get it.
Right. Exactly. And I think if that's your main design flaw, if that's your design philosophy,
and,
you know what I mean? Like, I like that.
Someone's saying, oh, well, too bad we live in the age of data mining and wikis. Well, again, just because we know that a dragon's there, we don't know how to pop it, right? How to make this event happen. And what if that event is stuck behind something like this city has to get built up, and on your particular server, that city is a barren wasteland. Well, guess what? Good luck, just because you know how to do it, actually getting it done.
I mean, again, drawing the parallels back to 11, it's like that Fey Lux, the Shadow Lord fight in the past. I wanted the fucking great sword from that. I wanted the armor from that, because it was just some of my favorite in the game. But on our server, we never took the northern.
Never had Zarkabard's Shadow Rain.
Exactly. Yep. And just by virtue of that, I never even got to try it. And do I wish I did? Yes. Do I wish I did to this day? Yes. But you know what? I'm not going to sit there and be like, I demand to be able to do Fey Lux, and it's not fair that it should be always open. And that kind of fucking fit throwing
it's terrible.
is the kind of shit that has, I think, really ruined World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV, because as soon as you start kowtowing to that attitude, it doesn't stop.
It doesn't never create memories either. You know, Chris made a joke earlier about Tremas. That was an actual thing that happened in World of Warcraft, where some players were able to train some elite dragon from way down south into Stormwind, and every time it would kill something, its health would reset and regenerate. Yeah. And all day it was just wrecking havoc everywhere until they were finally able to like get it up into the palace where all the big NPCs were to kill it. It was amazing.
Someone did that with Lord Kazak in that game too.
Yeah,
he just destroyed noobs all day.
And that's the thing, is that those types of events are always remembered far more than, what was 2015 seasonal event, you know what I mean? Like, you get the items from that shit, but then it ends up collecting dust in your inventory. Why does that matter? Like, what purpose does that serve? Why should I give a shit as a player? But no, I mean, if you have either, more emphasis on community run type events, or you have a player history, every day, every moment you're not logged in, you're missing potential history.
Something else I'd like to, obviously these developers probably aren't going to hear this, but I don't want regional like servers, like American server, Japan server. You know what? Put everybody on everything.
Yeah. And
that just creates difficulties with lag, though. That's why there's regional servers. Like,
that's true.
You
I'll
can
give
make
you
a
that.
character on a Japanese server right now if you wanted to in 14. It's just you don't because of the location of the server.
I'll give you that. No, that's fair. That's fair.
But that is one of the things that I missed from FF11 is, French players, Spanish players, Japanese players, American, everybody being able to interact. And sure, in some cases, people I wasn't able to get into a JP party because I'm American. All right, well, too bad. But, that's just one of the things that added to the diversity of the game.
Yeah, but 11 was so much slower paced, you could get away with the latency issues.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm really interested to end up seeing what...
have they mentioned anything about like how combat system is going to work or classes?
No, not really.
No.
Not really. Just a few
and that concerns me a little bit.
Yeah.
A few things to throw out there. They said that as of now, they're looking at like a late 2018 release and the beta opening as early as next year.
Wow.
I'm excited. I've not been excited for a new MMO.
How much are you going to drop on the Kickstarter?
Depends on how much I have. See, I want that $500 level where you get a lifetime subscription.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I don't have that money, and I'm not doing it.
Okay.
Especially, what if you drop that $500, it really sucks, and the game goes down?
Yeah,
it would suck. I mean, but again, part of this for me is... it's a game that's being developed on the philosophies that I want in an MMO. I'm willing to support
Which is something that I've always thought, Kickstarter was about, not just as a company to get money, right? But as a consumer, to put your money behind something that you believe in. Not just what am I getting out of this, right? I actually believe... the only one that I've ever donated to was Roll20, because there's never been an app like that before, and it's something that, role players online with friends all over the world needed, right? I don't even really use it that much anymore, but I think I'm still paying like a $5 subscription because I believe in that product and what it does.
And that's what this is. Like 14 was developed on a system of philosophies that I really don't agree with, and is still running on those philosophies, and that's frustrating. It's never-ending frustration for me.
Yeah.
Whereas this game is being developed the way I want an MMO to be.
Yeah. No, and that's true. And I think, our passion for something like FF14 is much more driven by the legacy of the Final Fantasy franchise than necessarily a whole lot of game philosophy or game design philosophy that we agree with. I think, therein sort of lies the heart of the conflict between Limit Break Radio as a show and Square Enix. It's why...
the eternal conflict.
Yeah, it's why we end up taking kind of a bit of a antagonistic role with Square Enix, because there are design philosophies that they have even, and some of those design philosophies came directly from Square Enix in the way that they managed and ran Final Fantasy XI. Yep. So, it is both frustrating and disheartening to see them take it in a different direction that you necessarily don't agree with. I am not as confident in this. I don't think I'm ready to lay down the money just yet. I need to see a little bit more, like the combat system, and I need to be sold on the world a little bit more, because as I said at the start, this is sort of generic fantasy-ish. It's not that I'm not willing to buy into a world like that. I definitely am, as is evidenced by my ability to get into any of the Elder Scrolls games.
Right.
But with that, you have to also recognize that there's a level of quality that came along with the Elder Scrolls games that most other games can't live up to. And to have that expectation, I think, is pretty I think that's pretty unreasonable. So I think the big two things for me are going to be the combat system and the way that this whole node system ends up shaking out. If it shakes out the way that we've kind of thought about it, I think it's brilliant, and I think it'll be a really, really fun game, and I'll absolutely want to be in on the ground floor. But there's so many variables here that could turn this into a total clusterfuck that I need to watch from the sidelines before I'm able to make a call on it.
I want to be there on day one when there's nothing and be a part of that original creation of the world.
I mean, it's definitely going to be an interesting experience, and that's the thing, is it's going to be an experience.
Yeah.
And I hope that they get enough of a player base underneath them to be able to...
Well, if the Kickstarter is any indication.
Yeah, the demand's there for a game like this.
They have over 12,500 backers in that 2.2 mil so far.
Wow.
That's a lot.
In 20 days.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That is definitely. But yeah, I think that's a good point, that there is definitely a will for this style of gameplay that I'm actually gonna hazard to say that a lot of the big MMO developers have really discounted.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and I know a lot of people have been saying too, like, I mean, there's all those crazy articles that are like, our MMO is dying, but I mean, in a sense, people like don't have time for the current type of MMO, or they just don't. The current style doesn't appeal to people, like you're saying, and I think that this is the direction MMOs need to take to keep them relevant.
Yeah, because engagement, I think, is the biggest problem at the moment. Like, keeping me engaged in an MMO is difficult.
Yeah, well, and what this does is it sets like this expectation that you're going to miss things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want to experience as much as you can. So you have the desire to play, but when you're gone for a little bit, or if you have to leave, you're like, all right, the expectation is there that I'm going to miss some stuff.
That's fair. I also think that a game like this would probably be way more willing to set caps and do things like, lateral character expansion instead of, constantly moving the goalposts forward. Yeah. And again, I think that that's all to the benefit of the world, because as soon as, what happens when you get to a level cap is that all of the gear and all of the armor starts to look like uber shit. Like, it starts to look like fucking awesome. It's got, weapon glows and stuff like this. But now, as we're going into the third expansion of Final Fantasy, what do you do to make, and specifically for 14, what do you do to make the next round of weapons seem more special? You've already got badass demonic looking weapons that have this great glow that are now completely irrelevant. But so what? Yeah, but how do you keep making the next definitively badass looking weapon? I don't think you do.
And it's the same thing we say about every single time new armor comes out. I mean, it looks cool, but it also looks like everything we've had up until this point.
Yeah, I've seen it before.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this, you actually have the ability to, you're resetting all of the expectations. So if, your gear 1 to 30 looks just like, your average foot soldier gear, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, because when you get to that player cap or that level cap, then you'll actually be getting badass gear that looks badass for a fucking reason, and it stays that way.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of stuff that I want to see out of MMOs. So, all right, well,